anyway, that will start. Welcome to the GDI seminar series. It's actually organized by Kata, who's sitting at the background. I want to thank her for organizing such an amazing lineup this semester and also next semester. So keep your eyes out for information popping up in your inbox about future interesting and exciting events that might for the students among us might relate very closely to what you do in class, but sometimes from a more practical point of view, as we will do today, and of course faculty, you know why you're here. Brilliant. Let me introduce and welcome Fuad Abubakar Mohammed. Fuad is the acting head of the Ghana Cocoa Marketing Company Ltd in London. He has been working for over 15 years in the cocoa, and from market intelligence to global value chain relations, worked with every stakeholder there is within the cocoa chocolate value chain. And we actually met 2013 when I was doing my PhD and had no idea about anything. And I ran into COCOBOD head office, arrived because I was stupid enough to walk there, very sweaty for office. And he was the person who was the most patient in explaining every single detail there is about cocoa marketing, cocoa intelligence. And I'm pretty sure that he would extend the same patience to you when he's delivering his lecture today. I'm over the moon that you're here. I'm so happy and thankful that you came. Over to you to deliver the presentation.
Thank you, Sophie. And good day. Well, to start with, I'm honored and humbled to be here. I'm not an academic, so it is a privilege to stand in front of academic staff and students, which the good thing is that it gives me an opportunity to learn and then to share, which I started this morning joining the commodity development class with Sophie and understanding the theoretical sphere of that. Our discussion here is to look at something which is not too abstract. My work involves a lot of travels outside the UK, and whenever I'm returning, the border control guys keep asking me, what do you do? And I say, I sell cocoa, I sell cacao. Then it sounds abstract to them. So I developed a new plan. I'm like, okay, I sell chocolate ingredients. So that makes it much easier. So anyone asks me wherever I go, what do you sell? Or what do you do? I sell chocolate ingredients. One way or the other, either you eat chocolate, enjoy some hot chocolate, or some ice cream. Now, for you to understand that better, there is no chocolate without cocoa. You cannot call anything chocolate without cocoa. There could be some other fats, maybe from palm oil or from shea butter, but you need some cocoa in it. So we are talking about something that we can all relate to. And one way or the other, it does affect you. Now, the topic we're looking at is resource-backed loans and its implication on value addition. Looking at Ghana as a case. Sophia,
Sorry.
Oh, I need to do that. If you have
Yeah, we don't have a click.
We don't have that. Okay. So I have to be here.
But I can, wait. Let me sit.
Okay, I can look at it from here.
You go to the front. If you like to sit there.
If not, I'll be doing a sketch.
Give me a note.
Okay, that's fine. So the outline is to look at how do we contextualize the whole topic. What are the research backends for the topic that we want to look at? Try to understand from a broader perspective or a general perspective, what are commodity dependent countries? I think that as development economics, you do appreciate that. But one thing from the experience of the border control, I now understand that you need to break it down for it to be well understood. Thirdly, we look at resource-backed loans, what they constitute, what are some of the examples, what is the literature. Then we narrow it down to cocoa and Ghana. Then deep dive again on the Cocoa syndicated loan, try to look at the nuances. A few months ago, the Ghana COCOBOD, Ghana has a regulated cocoa sector, so there's a shift in the financing strategy from offshore borrowing to indirect or domestic financing. What are the potentials and pitfalls of that system? Then we try to look at the research and policy recommendations. So as I mentioned, the inspirations from the paper on resource-backed loans, there has been an assessment by the World Bank of 52 resource-backed loans by this group of, we've got the reference at the end of the presentation, but that gave a very strong foundation for us to look at these days. I would say that they looked at RBLs or resource-backed loans that are medium to long term, 5 years to 10 years or so, even out to 40 years. The COCO loan is a short-term structure. It has a short-term structure, about 7 months. But that is important to situate this within that context. They looked at the pitfalls and the potentials for the resource-backed loan. Some of them are a bit opaque, and there's no transparency in the financing arrangement. We can look at that side by side with the COCO one. And move from the global perspective, i.e. Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa has been quite dominant with the use of this financing structure. But we go down into a paper that looks at Sub-Saharan Africa only. Then the part on commodity dependence, we definitely have to rely on UNCTAD to look at the most recent UNCTAD report on commodity dependence. And then thankfully, the two papers and an article that I did with Sophie. One is a working paper that we released somewhere in July. The first one looked at the potential upgrade in commodity value chains, again taking Ghana as a case, and what are the institutional challenges or barriers that hinders upgrading locally. Then a question on why doesn't Ghana get the value out of its cocoa. Often it's much easier to say that you can easily capture value within the cocoa supply chain or cocoa value chain. But what are the nuances? What are the barriers locally and internationally? We try to look at that. And the most recent working paper, which thankfully we did with the GTI. Mm-hmm. Okay. So thankfully, I think looking at the audience, we don't really have to talk much about what CDCs are, but definitely since we are recording, it could land onto the screen or computer of someone who doesn't understand these things. So it's important to explain. So generally, CDCs are countries or nations with 60% of their total export merchandise coming from primary exports. And that could be minerals, it could be energy, and it could be agriculture. They are heavily dependent on natural resources. Again, because it is export, they are highly vulnerable. And we will cite the case of Chad. We did the financing with South Sudan and Glencore that extended financing to South Sudan when oil prices were higher. When prices crashed, it affected the repayment structure of the loan. So that is how vulnerable some of these countries could be. Having mentioned CDCs, it's a bit too easy to say that, okay, there are some developed economies who are high exporters. Do you put them in the same categories? No, we have the ordinary CDCs, which are developed countries and developing countries. So if you look at the visual to the right, you could see I hope it is clear enough. Exactly. So it's pictured in terms of the commodity that these countries depend on or export. For Ghana, you see mining in the i.e. minerals, but then cocoa also plays a very important role. I think before the discovery of oil, cocoa was the second largest foreign exchange earner for Ghana until recently. Now we've got gold, we've got oil, then cocoa. But we look at the specific examples. So you have Saudi Arabia, which is a CDC, Australia, Norway, Russia, but you cannot call these countries developing countries, or at least developing countries. So we need to have that segregation. Our concentration will be on the commodity-dependent developing countries, i.e. countries like my own country, Ghana, Angola, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Ecuador. That's fine. Okay. So the reason why focusing on the developing countries is very important is the relationship between commodity dependence and economic development. The visual to the left shows that commodity dependence is more prevalent among developing countries. If you look at the far left, where you have landlocked developing countries, about 81% of their total export merchandise is commodities, which is challenging. Because the chart on the right will give us an understanding of why that is a bit problematic. Is that when you compare that with their level of human capital, high commodity dependence is correlated to low human capital. And that is why that is super important. You have, for developed economies, you have just about 13% of their exports being primary commodities, which is something that we need to take advantage of, or we need to pay attention to. So for any country to move from developing country to a developed economy, then it has to make that transition. And we do have examples of countries like Malaysia that have done brilliantly well with that. And you can even cite Vietnam, which has a strong shift from export of primary commodities into a high level of manufactured goods as well. Please don't hesitate to draw my attention if I'm rushing it to the slide. Okay, so now having looked at what countries we're trying to, look at, we go to resource-backed loans. Now the question is, what are resource-backed loans? So I mentioned, I know a lot of us here do understand it, but again, we need to try and explain that. So these are loans that are often extended to the government or a state-owned enterprise. We'll come to the case of Ghana and try to understand why a company like the Ghana COCOBOD is able to do that. The country needs to have a hold on that resources to be able to do that. If it is purely a private or a liberalized market, that is quite challenging because of the ownership of the control of that commodity. And examples are oil, gas, copper, bauxite. We'll try to cite some when we come to the details. The repayment for RBL or resource-backed loan is secured by income from the resources. So it could be that the resources are used to pay the loan directly, as in what we used to call a barter system. You get the money, you repay it with oil, gas, cocoa, or something else, a resource. Secondly, it could be that it is the revenue from the sale of that resource is what will be used to repay the loan. But then, in most cases, you have to collateralize it. Now, why are RBLs becoming quite popular and very important, especially for developing countries? Access to credit on the international market is becoming tighter because most countries do not have a deeper financial system locally for them to be able to access financing. So they try to use what they have to access what they need. And that is the resources that they have. So nations leverage resources to attract capital despite constraints. And that goes back to one of the initial papers by the World Bank. We looked at, okay, there's no transparency, but the requirement for you to get RBL is not as stricter as a traditional loan, which look at the credit ratings and among the other things. Again, for most lenders, the risk of default is much lower compared to traditional loans. In some cases, a lender can easily grab or take hold of that resource to make sure that the loan is repaid. And thirdly, in the case of, all the examples that we're going to cite, the funds have been used for long-term investment projects. In some cases, so for Ghana's first or long-term RBLs, they were used to finance an electric power project, which is a WIDA. And coincidentally, it was cocoa that was used to back these resources. In South and Central Africa, in most cases, resource-backed loans were used to finance real projects and a lot of other infrastructure, which could have been very difficult for some of these countries to get capital to do these projects. Now, possibly the literature could have come first, but again, we try to look at why is it important. And then we go to the literature. It goes as far back as the mid-19th century, when Peru was using guano, which is a fertilizer source from or extracted from bird extraction. It was very, very lucrative in those years, and Peru used that to access loans from the international market, especially from Western Europe and North America. And even as far back as that point, we look at an amount of up to $300 million. I mean, if this is we look at that in current terms, then that will be very, very significant. But we've seen a shift from a period where Peru sought this loan from the West. Now most of the RBLs is coming from the East. So most of the RBLs that was analyzed by the World Bank were dominated by lenders, the China Exim Bank, the China Development Bank, the ICBC, and Korea Exim. I mean, in the case of Ghana, both the COCOBOD loans, which were long-term in nature, were sourced from a Chinese state corporation. So key examples, and all the 52 that were assessed were from Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa. But there's an interesting twist whereas most of these lenders were state agencies or state-affiliated companies, there are international trading houses or trading companies who also extend some form of RBL to countries. Trafigura is one of them that extended loan to South Sudan and DR Congo. Glencore also did that with Chad and Congo Republic. All these finances were acting for oil. The interesting bit about that, the Chad case, was that Chevron had a huge stake in an oil facility in Chad, and Chad needed financing to buy back some shares from Chevron. So who provided the financing for that transaction? They had stepped in and provided that financing for Chad to buy the stake in that facility. And for most of these RBL, the duration is quite medium to long term, as I indicated. So from the far left, we look at RBL by commodity collateralized, which I have mentioned earlier. But in the 52 that was assessed or that was analyzed in that World Bank report, 43, this count. So 43 out of the 52 had oil as the backing commodity for that RBL. 6 from oil. Interestingly, 2 from cocoa, and coincidentally both were done by Ghana. The third one was tobacco, and that was Zimbabwe and the Chinese government. So Zimbabwe used tobacco as a resource to get loan from the Chinese government. Now, when we dive deeper into sub-Saharan Africa, you look at the staggering amount that they've been able to access with this structure. So what you see out there, Angola, $24 billion was accessed largely from Chinese lenders. You have Ghana, 5.5 billion. This, because as I mentioned, this has to do with long-term facilities. These were COCOBOD loans, but this was not a Cocoa Syndicated Loan. This was a loan extended by the China, I think, Sino Hydro, for the construction of Bui Dam in Ghana. But then cocoa was used to back this facility. Also, one outlier is the lending to Guinea, which was backed by copper. So Guinea accessed nearly about $20 billion using their resource. So we've seen other examples as well. And now we deep dive into cocoa and Ghana. Okay, so to put it in context, which I know that could be a repetition of what some of you do know, cocoa is the most important agri-export in West Africa. Big in Ghana, big in Cote d'Ivoire, big in Nigeria. Nigeria could be very noted for, much noted for oil, but cocoa is the second largest FX earner for Nigeria. It's big in Cameroon, it's big in, even becoming bigger in countries like Uganda and other Central African countries. Again, West and Central Africa command over 75% of global cocoa output. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire nearly about 60%. So anything that happens within that geographical space in terms of supply has an effect on cocoa prices, and that affects the price at which you purchase chocolates. If you analyze that, you realize how chocolate prices is either chocolate prices have gone up or you are eating chocolate with less cocoa content. Because there's a way that manufacturers find to reduce their expenses on cocoa. And Ghana is the second largest producer of cocoa globally. Over the past 5 years, the average output for Ghana has been around 800,000, but unfortunately Ghana took a hit. And last year was around 645. This year is struggling to do $450,000. And that is what has pushed chocolate prices to nearly triple. Last year, the average chocolate price for cocoa on the international market was barely around 2,000, 2,500. A few months ago, in April, cocoa prices reached $11,000. And now it has sort of come down because there's a new season coming in place. So we've seen prices sort of, I wouldn't say tumbling because it's definitely much higher than the long-term average, nearly about $7,000.
Sorry, would it be due to weather conditions for the region to this state?
Yeah, that is the most important driver. Yeah, for weather condition I wouldn't say for weather condition, erratic weather condition. Yes, in West Africa, because farmers do not really use weather intelligence for their planning purposes. So they have a traditional idea of, okay, this is how the rainfall pattern is going to be. If it deviates from that, then they get messed up. And that is the challenge that farmers in both Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire found themselves in. Secondly, most of the trees are becoming a bit aged and highly vulnerable to diseases. So there's this disease called, I'm speaking on this because I worked in research for 9 years. That was how come I met Sophia. I used to handle crop protection for the cocoa marketing company, so I have understand of it. There's a disease called the swollen shoot disease, which requires that the tree needs to be cut down and replaced. And this is spreading a bit faster in both Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. And that is the biggest hit on farm production.
Would you had Ghana in recent times?
Well, Ghana is becoming a big issue. So structurally, yes. But for you to have production dropping from 800,000 to 450,000 within a year, that cannot be attributed to illegal mining, right? But structurally, it has an effect on output.
I'm curious about the life cycle of the plants. So, how long does it take in between planting the seed and harvesting?
Okay.
And then maybe what is how long does each tree last? I guess what's for how many years is it bear fruit?
Okay, that's one.
I'm sorry. Yep.
No, there's some story about it. I'll give you an answer to that. Don't worry. Okay. So please, I'm patient enough to listen to give you the response. So the life cycle of the tree is usually 30 years. You could have some trees which are up to 40 years, but they are not productive. From planting to reaching maturity. By maturity, I define that for it to start to fruit between 2 to 3 years. In the past, it was 8 years, which was too long a time for people to wait. But due to a lot of research in planting materials, now that has been shortened. So you plant seedlings today, it takes up to between 2 to 3 years for it to start fruiting. From flowering to harvesting the pod, so you already have a tree which is mature, that takes 5 to 6 months. So your flower appears on the tree for it to get to a cocoa pod that you saw on the title slide, that takes up to 6 months. And that is where it is highly vulnerable to weather conditions. A flower that encounters heavy rains means that you're going to lose all the flower. Have I answered your question?
Yes. And the smile. Okay.
So I did mention earlier that cocoa ranks among the top FX earners for Ghana and plays a key role in the central bank's BOP or balance of payments management and even currency stabilization efforts for Ghana. But one key distinction that Ghana has compared to other cocoa producing countries is that Ghana has a regulated cocoa industry. It used to be regulated across West Africa prior to the structural adjustment program by the World Bank, which liberalized all the cocoa sector. So by liberalizing, it moved from state control to private engagement. If you go to countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Brazil, the whole sector is dominated by private players. Private players buy cocoa from farmers, do the processing and export the beans. In Cote d'Ivoire, there's an export and exit. So the government takes export taxes when you are exporting them. So that is a benefit that comes to the government. In Nigeria, there's some taxes, but not that significant. In the case of Ghana, the World Bank pushed for the liberalization of the internal market. Previously, there was one state's budget that was buying all cocoa from farmers. So as a producer, you are obliged to sell that cocoa to that one company. And that was when it was a monopoly. So that was 100% regulation. One state company buying from farmers, one state company exporting the cocoa on behalf of the country. That shifted with the SAP. That it opened up the doors for private engagements in the internal marketing. So what they do is that the board or the regulator, which is the Ghana Cocoa Board, issues licenses to private players to buy cocoa from the farms and hand over that cocoa to the regulator. The responsibility or the monopoly of selling that cocoa, either locally to a cocoa processing factory or internationally for export purposes, is a monopoly of the Ghana Cocoa Board. And that is what the CMC handles. So that is what I mean by liberalized internal marketing. So the internal marketing is liberalized, private actors play a key role. We do have some multinational companies playing, having a stake in that, but the export part or the shipment part is handled purely by the state company. It has its own advantages and some drawbacks, which I've highlighted on the 7th point.
Sorry, just to cut you a little bit. The CMC is controlled directly by the government, right?
So the CNC is a company owned by the Ghana Cocoa Board, and the Ghana Cocoa Board is government, is a parastatal, which here we call is a quick-off, if I'm correct.
Okay, but I was glad you mentioned that Ghana is in an IDF program, and in order for you to be in that IDF program, they pushed for the implementation of actually this whole process, right? Then how come that still somehow the government has uphold the whole battle stealing the own products?
Okay, so the IBEC program I'm referring to is not the current one. This is something that happened in the late 1980s. Okay, that was, I think, I might be too young to remember that, the exact age, this exact year. But the whole of West Africa used to have a lot of regulated marketing boards. Nigeria used to have a cocoa board, Cote d'Ivoire used to have a cocoa. What the World Bank pushed for or recommended that liberalization. All these other countries privatized their cocoa sector. Ghana didn't. What Ghana did was to do a partial liberalization. That's the term we use. Partial liberalization means that the internal marketing, buying from the farmer, has been opened up for other private parties to play a role. The other part, which is where the revenue comes in, still remains a monopoly with the government. And that has been the case since 1992. And it's still the case. Exactly. So the new IMF program has no relationship with this one.
And the IMF is actually okay with you?
Well, they have no choice, so that is how it goes. Yeah, you need to know the leverage you have. So.
Okay.
So I think I highlighted that there are some strengths that come with regulation. I know there are some Ghanaians here, so they refer to hear that Ghana's cocoa is a highly, in terms of quality, it's difficult for you to compare with any other cocoa. If you speak to any warehouse operator in Europe or in the US, they will tell you, when you take delivery of cocoa beans from Ghana, you don't need to do anything. You can easily take that cocoa out of the bag and put it in a manufacturing facility. You cannot do that with any cocoa from Nigeria. It comes with stones, it comes with metals in there. And that is because the farmers do a lot of work. It's making sure that the quality is consistent. There are no foreign materials in it. There are no cluster beans in it. And this is something they have done for decades. So if I'm to show you a price screen of cocoa prices in European forms, Ghana could be 300 to 400 euros above prices from Cote d'Ivoire, nearly about 700 euros ahead of prices from Ecuador. And that is because you have a regulator. The regulator has another body, which is the quality control company. So they make sure that quality is consistent and uniform. So as a farmer, you cannot take cocoa to quality control. If they don't accept it, if you have multiple operators within that space, another person could take delivery of it. But when you have one single entity, the quality parameters are uniform, or it's just one. So you either meet it or you meet it. And that is what farmers have traditionally been able to do. So if you speak to any chocolate here, and you mention Ghana cocoa beans, they know it. One of the countries that are noted for stringent food safety standards is Japan. And every cocoa that goes into Japan, nearly about 70% should be Ghana because of the quality. And that is the strength of having some of these this system in place. Again, you have one single seller. So as I indicate, there's a monopoly on the selling side, which is CMC. So there's reliability when it comes to counterparts. Let me give an example. At present, a lot of chocolate companies are being messed up. The reason is that if you got a contract from an exporter or a supplier from Ecuador, where prices were $2,000 or $3,000, prices skyrocketed to $11,000. That rational exporter wouldn't fulfill that. He will find a new buyer who could even pay maybe $7,000 or $8,000, and that is almost double or more than double the price. So there's always an incentive for a private exporter or seller to default on a contract. For a state agency, Ghana doesn't do that. So Ghana rarely defaults on a contract. When Ghana does default on a contract, or technically defaults on a contract, then it's because it has an output hit and not because of prices. So one of the criticism that the COCOBOD has received over the years, those in Ghana are aware of that, is why are farmers not getting high prices? The challenge is on one of the slides that we look at. It is because forward contract that has been established before the market sells needs to be fulfilled at that prices. Arguments have been made that there should be some room for renegotiation of prices, which is something to look at. But the point is that over the past 50 years, we haven't seen prices at this level. So it's a new dynamic that is evolving, which we have to pay attention to. So that's some of the strength. And beyond the cocoa sector, the Ghana's hold of cocoa, or that regulation, then gives the government or the COCOBOD that leverage to access RBL. And as I mentioned, it plays a major role in Ghana's macro and most importantly on the current local currency stabilization effort. So it's timed into the calendar. If cocoa loan or cocoa revenue doesn't come in, the rate of depreciation of the Ghanaian currency is much, much higher.
And I understand also I find that it's highly delicate. How does that also play a role in the forest situation in your price trading? Is it also regulated the way cocoa is regulated?
No. So the gold sector is purely dominated by private asset, and that is why Ghana finds it difficult to use gold as a resource to back a loan. But then it has a hold on cocoa, so it uses cocoa for the loan.
Because that's where my point would have come in. Even Tanzania is highly elevated topic. They have Tanzania, if we have gold out, but we also do the A backs.
It depends on the ownership, who has the control. If I give an example, if oil in Chad had to borrow money to buy shares from Chevron for oil in Chad. So that tells you who controls it. Okay, the visual we have there, the lighter part, is within the equator line, the production areas, where you have Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Cameroon, Nigeria, and far to the left you have Ecuador hiding in there. So that is where the production takes place. I mean, these 5 countries control over 80% of global cocoa output. When you add Ecuador to the Western Central African scene. But where does the consumption take place? The consumption takes place largely in the global north. I mean, thankfully, the UK is a key chocolate market. It's the biggest chocolate market and second largest chocolate market in Europe. Not on per capita, because often we quote the Swiss, but UK is a big consumer of chocolate. Same with Germany. But the US remains the biggest chocolate market in terms of volume. Okay, so now we dig down into the Ghana Cocoa Syndicated Loan. I mean, as I mentioned, my experience with border control means that I have to try and explain a lot of things. A syndicated loan is basically a loan that is provided by a group of banks. Rather than one-to-one, a group of banks come together to lend money to a single borrower. And in this case, often we have 19, 20, 25 AAA rated top international banks lending money to the Ghana COCOBOD. We do have, in the past, we do have banks like, JP Morgan, the Citibank, and others as part of the syndication. ICBC of China is always a big player. A lot of international banks are part of this syndicate, and annually they extend loans to the Ghana COCOBOD. It started in 1992-93. Okay, maybe I'll come to that. But lenders put their resources together. That's why it's a syndicate. So rather than one bank extended 2 billion, we once had a proposal from Goldman Sachs that look, we can easily lend out 1.5 billion to COCOBOD, because this nothing too big for us. But it's a syndicate. So a group of banks come together, lend the money to COCOBOD, and they share, in the risk. In this case, at least the risk is minimized. Rather than you being exposed to a party, the risk is shared. And again, the returns in the form of interest payment is also shared among stakeholders. And often we have, even though we have multiple banks, there's always one or lead bank that does the core, which we call the lead bank. With the specifics, which I have already touched on, started in 1992, 1993, 94. Often we have multiple banks, sometimes up to 25, sometimes up to 30 banks coming together to extend a facility to Ghana. It started around 93 with an amount of just about 150 million or 200 million, but that's increased substantially. The highest we had was in 2014-15, which was $2 billion. And in recent years, it has kind of reduced. Last year was 800 million. We drew down, or we took out 600 million with that, and left 200 million. We'll explain why that is the case. But why does Ghana go for that financing? Primarily to finance cocoa purchases. Because when you are buying something from a farmer, you need to pay the farmer. It's an exchange. Cocoa for money. In Côte d'Ivoire, often there are challenges with that, because a group of exporters or cooperatives sold the cocoa from the farmer, take the cocoa to Abidjan or St. Pedro, where the ports are or where the exporters are, then get the money to come and pay the farmer, which is a bit challenging for most farmers. If they are lucky and get pre-financed, then that makes it easier for them to make that front payment. But in our case, we have to make sure that that money is available. If you don't do that, it results in quantity risk, and that is something Sophie and I and other colleagues looked at in the working paper. By quantity risk, we are neighbored with other countries, Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, and others. If you don't secure whatever is produced, we call it smuggling, but it visits the other countries. So in 2014, Togo, which produces barely 10,000 tons of cocoa, exported 140,000 tons of cocoa. And that is because of the quantity rate. When prices are higher in the neighboring countries, we do not have regulators. Then there's quantity rate, because a lot of cocoa move out to these countries for smuggling, which is illegal, but is done anyway. So the primary objective of the syndicated loan was to finance cocoa purchases in the local currency. And I'm highlighting on this one because it's very important how the system works. The board needs Ghana cedis to purchase cocoa from farmers, but it goes for a loan which is denominated in US dollars. So the question then becomes, who is the primary beneficiary of the US dollars. It is the central bank. So the central bank takes delivery of that US dollars. Whatever COCOBOD goes for, or Ghana goes for, with respect to the syndicated loan, 2 billion, it has to go to the central bank, and the central bank releases the CE equivalent for the COCOBOD. I mean, the main reason was, that in 1983, Ghana discovered oil, so it needed a cheaper and easy source of FX for oil import, and that was why cocoa was leveraged for that purpose. I mentioned earlier, repayment is within a short period, 7 months. The interest rate is very competitive. I mean, over the past 31 years, the average interest rate was 34%. The highest we've seen was the current season, which is 7.9%. And that will be attributed to rising interest rates globally, again, risk of Ghana defaulting. Because as I mentioned, output has dropped over the past few years, and that is the risk that lenders see. Why is the Cocoa Syndicated Loan a resource-backed loan? Because the loan is backed by the cocoa. So cocoa is used to back the loan. Repayment is made using revenues from the cocoa contracts that we make. And in the initial slides, I indicated some other forms of RBLs that trading companies have. I mentioned Trafigura and Glencore. In the space of cocoa, we have Barry Callebaut, Cargill, Olam, and Tweeton advancing some monies to COCOBOD or to the Ghana regulator for cocoa purchase. So that is also a form of RBL, but that is not our focus of discussion. Okay, so this is the structure of the loan. I'll start from the bottom part, which is the foreign bank. So that is where the money comes from. But then what is the guarantee for the money to come in? CMC needs to make sure that there are forward sales contracts, which you find. So if you're unfortunate, we don't have a pointer, so that is...
And then, foreign bank.
So forward sales contract. So you need the forward sales contract to feed into the syndicated loan, which is the collateral, before the money is released. The money goes to the lead bank, and the syndicated loan is in USD, as we indicated, goes to the GIB, which is a Ghanaian bank based in London. And then it's important to give assurance to the lenders that the money is not going to go to Ghana before it is repaid. The money sits in an entity which is regulated by the FCA. So there's confidence that that money cannot just disappear, and that has never defaulted on that loan. So as I indicate, the money moves from the Ghana GIB London, goes through the central bank, loan in US dollars to the central bank. They lend it to, or they release the money to the CMC in cities, and that is what is used to pay the LDCs to finance cocoa. On the other way around, you have the farmers delivering the cocoa beans to buy cocoa, deliver the cocoa to LDCs. Then the cocoa goes to CMC, split in two to international buyers. On the bottom, on the top, you have domestic buyers for domestic processes. The receiver, that's cocoa proceeds, then goes to the syndicated, either the non-syndicated account for domestic buyers or into the syndicated account. If 70% of the output is syndicated, then that amount has to be in the syndicated account. So the board doesn't have access to that. It's an escrow account. It doesn't have access to that account until the loan is repaid. Okay, so that is the structure of the loan, from where the money comes from and so that's the exchange. Cocoa from that side, money from that side. And these are the rewards and the risks over the past 31 years. I mean, the loan on itself has injected $28 billion into the Ghanaian economy, and that is quite an amount for cocoa to contribute. It has enabled prompt payment to farmers, as I indicated in the earlier. The money has been utilized in financing investments or in the purchase of fertilizers, because it's a cycle. You need to invest in productivity enhancing technologies to get the yield, to get more revenue. A lot of investment also needs the pest control as well as in the logistics for cocoa sourcing. It has enhanced liquidity in the domestic banking sector, because this money circulates within the economy. Then, as I indicated, that even though we do have gold, we do have oil, the single largest FX hit onto the central bank's reserve is the cocoa loan. Because if we go for 2 billion, the drawdown is within the period of October to December, and it could be slipped in 2, maybe or 3. 1 billion, 500 billion, 500 million. Inflows from oil and gold are steady, so maybe it trickles in on monthly basis. But the syndicated loan is the single largest FX hit onto the central bank's reserve. In terms of the risk, and that is something that we will look at in the next 2 slides, it's been counterproductive to CMC's ability to maximize sales price, because you need to sell contracts forward as collateral for the loan. The CMC is then pushed to sell cocoa even if prices are low. A classical case is the current year, or the just in the 23-24 season. CMC started selling, and CMC sells nearly 6 or even 12 to 18 months ahead. Now prices were just below $2,000 last year in 2023. I mean, first quarter 2023. 12 months down the line, it's skyrocketed 4-fold. Now, if you have sold contracts because you need to collateralize for the loan, you miss the opportunity when markets went up. And because the loan is quite significant, often up to about 70%, there are times that it could be lower, but up to about 70% of total output is committed. So when you did this contracts when prices were low, you don't have the opportunity to take advantage of spot prices. And back to the point that you asked, why the supply challenges? Whenever you have supply challenges, the futures market becomes inverted, where spot prices are much higher. There were times where spot prices compared to futures, by futures I mean forward prices, was nearly about $4,000. And what it means is that Ghana missed the opportunity to take advantage of these prices. So that was one of the key challenges, and we highlighted that in the working paper. And it's been marginally into indigenous processing companies, because the lenders think that indigenous processing companies are risky. So CMC is then pushed to sell more to multinational companies who are seen to be creditworthy or more reliable. So contracts is then skewed to these companies. Why is this important? Because it affects the availability of beans to local or indigenous processing factories. I will be using the term indigenous and not local, because within the local space we have all the multinational processing companies have facilities in Ghana. So by indigenous I mean companies that are owned by Ghanaians. Right, and COCOBOD lack the financial independence and at the mercy of lenders. This year the currency is a classical is a case in mind. Delays in the release of this syndicated loan means that the board doesn't have an alternative source of financing to buy cocoa. And when you don't do that, the cocoa travels to the other countries. And that is a big quantity risk. Then, domineering role of COCOBOD in allocating finance. The LBCs rely mostly on COCOBOD. So if there are delays from the regulator, then it affects the operation of the LBCs. Again, it affects operation of the domestic banking sector. I did touch on the implications for value addition, and this is very, very important. The prioritization of foreign exchange earnings from the beans instead of domestic upgrading. So because it plays a major role with especially for the central bank. The central bank needs efforts ASAP. So you are then pushed to have the immediate resource here, rather than taking time and adding value to it before exporting and generating more. An example, today cocoa beans, raw cocoa beans cost nearly about $6,000, $7,000. If you do second stage value addition, which is cocoa butter is priced around $26,000. So it gives you, there's a lot of opportunities if you add value. But because of the structure of the loan, which requires that, okay, you are selling beans or exporting beans to get efforts largely for the central bank, then you are not given that space to be able to generate more. So that's why I explained the collateralization of the sales contract. Lenders prefer contract from multinational buyers, where they think that these are reliable buyers compared to contract from local processors. Funny enough, the local processors are the ones who have the capability to upgrade. The chocolate manufacturing space in Ghana is dominated by indigenous companies and not multinational companies. None of the multinational companies that chocolate manufacturing in Ghana. All they do is the first and second stage processing, i.e. cocoa mass, cocoa butter, and cocoa powder, and export it. So if you want to build value or do value addition, then these indigenous companies need to be incentivized. But unfortunately, the syndicated loan structure is a disincentive for you to upgrade them. And it's something that we highlighted on the first paper, potential upgrading. Then thirdly, you will see the surge in the number of small-scale chocolate makers. They are not really processors, but people who are, chocolatepreneurs. They've taken keen interest in chocolate making, artisanal chocolate makers. Because they don't fit into the requirement for the loan, it makes it difficult because you need to service the multinational buyers whose contract will be used for the loan. The residual will then be shared among the indigenous companies and the artisanal players. So in that case, the loan is good for a certain purpose, but then it also hinders upgrading in the chocolate value chain for the indigenous players. And that is a key part of the argument that we are making. But thankfully, there has been a shift. So 2024-25, the board decided that they are not going to go for the syndicated loan after 31 years dependent on it, which has been a huge departure from what we've been doing. What is the new model? The new model is that these buying companies, that the privates, we call them LBCs, are to secure their own financing. And that is what happens in other producing countries anyway. In Nigeria, in Cote d'Ivoire, exporters or buying companies arrange their own financing and purchase the cocoa from farmers. So in this case, the regulator takes itself out of that space and allow private parties to take to play that role. It comes with a lot of advantages and some challenges. The big advantage is that, as we indicated, with the ability of CMC to maximize prices, in this case, if the board doesn't go for a syndicated loan, what it means is that it has flexibility in when to sell. It can take advantage of both forward contracts as well as spot contracts. So you are not pushed to sell up to 70% of your output far ahead, maybe 6 months or 12 months ahead. You have the flexibility, sell today, sell tomorrow. But one key point we need to highlight is that the volume for Ghana is quite significant for you to see that you're going to sell spot. Other countries like Ecuador is big now, Nigeria and Cameroon, they are doing about 300,000. They have that advantage to be selling more of sports. I mean, buyers would anyway not buy long-term contract from some of these countries because of counterparty risk. They prefer to buy long-term contract from Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. One, because we have the volume, and two, there's counterparty reliability. So the new structure also has some low credit risk, especially for the LBCs. Notwithstanding the syndicated loan in the past, LBCs kind of does a mixture of sourcing, dominantly from the COCOBOD syndicated loan, but also from the domestic financing sector or the domestic banking sector. The challenge is that they buy the cocoa, deliver the cocoa to COCOBOD. COCOBOD needs to pay them for that, for the services that they have provided. One with the cost of the cocoa as well as their margins. Any delay in reimbursing the LBCs means a big risk for them. I mean, their credit worthiness becomes challenging, and that affects the domestic banking sector. But with this new arrangement, there's no COCOBOD, what I would term as COCOBOD risk. You don't have a big elephant sitting there holding the money and deciding when to release the money. Go out there to either an international lender, a trader, or a domestic bank, get your loan, deliver the cocoa to COCOBOD. One key requirement that has been put in the new arrangement was a four-party arrangement. You have the buying company, which is a private entity buying from the farmer. You have COCOBOD and the CMC as the two other parties. Then you have the international company or the multinational company, which is the trading company. The trading companies are ready to extend loans to the LBCs directly without the involvement of the COCOBOD. There were earlier proposals that why doesn't COCOBOD go to these international buyers for the loan? But that will give so much power to the multinational companies. In that way, that is a direct relationship between COCOBOD and the multinational companies. There's always incentive for the companies to mobilize volume locally. Who is handling the volume? And that's the LBCs. So they are extending the loan to the LBCs. The LBCs go and buy the cocoa from the farmers, hand over the cocoa to the COCOBOD. When COCOBOD exports it, a bit technical in explaining this, which is something I think we'll try to explain in fine-tuning the paper. When COCOBOD makes the cocoa or the parcel of cocoa ready for shipment, 60% of the invoice value is then paid to COCOBOD by the trading house. When it does that, there's a caveat that COCOBOD is mandated to re-embed the LBC that has either used its own financing to buy the cocoa or gone for a loan from a bank or from a trading house. And that should be done before the remaining 40% is paid. So previously, when you have a risk of COCOBOD holding the funds, now COCOBOD has to release the funds to get the extra 40%, where it has most of its margin coming from. So that we just want to see how it just started. We want to see how it works. But in terms of strategy, it looks very good. LBCs are quite happy with it. The international players are quite happy with it. Strategy is definitely different from execution. So let's see how the execution looks like. But then our view is that with this new structure, that level of marginalization that helps, because there's no collateralization and there's no choice. So, okay, let's give more loans to multinational companies at the expense of domestic processes. Now, domestic processes can themselves pre-finance bean sourcing, i.e. by extending loans to LBCs to buy cocoa. Two, they can also take delivery of cocoa that has been pre-financed by international companies. And I'm highlighting on this point because the whole topic is to look at how the syndicated loan is affecting value addition. So if there's a departure and an international company does a contract with the CMC for 100,000 tons of beans, thankfully not all the 100,000 tons of beans are exportable. There's a policy in Ghana where what we call lower category beans, not lower grade beans, lower category beans because they are smaller in sizes, are not exportable. It's an incentive for the local, the domestic processing sector. Now, with this structure, an international trading company which doesn't have a processing facility locally. So, for an example, we have a company called Sukdin, which is huge in sugar, in coffee, and others, a French company. It doesn't have a processing factory in Ghana. If it pre-finances an LBC to purchase up to 100,000 tons, not all the 100,000 tons are exportable. It could be 80,000 tons. The 20,000 left will then be given to a domestic or an indigenous processing company, and that gives them some opportunities as well. Previously, they would either use their funding to do it, or they have to wait when the collateralization is done, and the residual will then be the one that will be allocated to them. So there are some advantages that come with this, and we explained the enhanced liquidity for the processing sector. Now they don't rely directly on COCOBOD, but they can go out there because they are working in partnership with an LBC, get financing, and also does establish what we call tolling arrangement. So tolling arrangement, they say that a processing company does not have adequate funds to buy the cocoa, but that's an indigenous company. But as a trading company, I'll use some of the Japanese companies who do not have processing facilities locally, Itochu, Mitsubishi, or Michu. They will then pre-finance or say that, okay, we are buying from CMC, but we don't want to export beans. Because there's a significant shift in the primary value addition from Europe. At the moment, Cote d'Ivoire is the largest cocoa processing destination or country ahead of the Netherlands, which used to be the case. So there's strong investments in West Africa to do a lot of processing there in terms of cost. You have the base in West Africa, why don't you do the first, second stage processing in West Africa? Additionally, there are some incentives extended by the government of Ghana as well as the government of Cote d'Ivoire for you to establish a factory there. So most of these companies will extend financing or buy the cocoa from CMC, then hand over to a domestic or an indigenous processor to transform it into butter and mass for export purposes. And that's an advantage that some of these companies would have. And one advantage also is the improved supply chain relationships with the, in the face of new sustainability regulations. We had the European Union Deforestation Regulation, which was quite topical, but thankfully it's been, the implementation has been extended. We have the UK has the Forest Act, and these are sustainability regulations that are tied to commodities that are seen to be forest risk, and cocoa is among them. The US has the Environmental Act as well. So for a retailer like Tesco, Lidl, Walmart, they need to have a strong relationship with their supply chain. It is not the operator or the trader who will bear the consequence when they bring in commodities that are forest that are related to deforestation. It is the retailer that suffers. So the retailers are now having the opportunity, as well as the chocolate companies like Hershey, Mars, and others, to work directly with the source of the chain. And that's some of the advantage that the system brings. Okay. So in concluding, we try to look at what are some of the policy recommendations, and our attempts, not as a researcher, just to try to give a view of maybe as researchers, these are some of the things that we think will be very, very beneficial going forward. We indicated the domestic financing mechanism. Even though there's a shift from the syndicated loan to a new form of financing, the new form of financing is also offshore, because the money is coming from outside. And before coming here, I was arguing with Sophie that getting money offshore is not really about them. I mean, there's huge capital out there. I mean, the biggest holder of US debt is not the US, it's China. Okay, so it's not really a big issue having financing coming from somewhere, but it shouldn't affect your domestic upgrading strategy. And that is why it's quite important for us to develop domestic financing mechanism. There have been discussion of looking at pension funds as a source of, cocoa financing the cocoa sector. It's something to be looked at. And two, how do you promote value addition? We need to provide incentives to domestic processing industries to boost value addition. And we'll cite, it's important to look at what Malaysia has done with palm and rubber. I mean, Malaysia moved from a commodity-dependent country to a country that exports a lot of manufactured goods. We've seen that strategy shift also in Vietnam. And there are lessons that countries like Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria can look at. But there's an interesting twist: value capture. Often, maybe as researchers, they focus on value addition and value chain have been how do developing countries add value locally in their countries. It's taken a long time to be able to do that. But there are examples of how other countries like Saudi Arabia has done. How do we capture value in a consumer market? And I'll cite the example of Saudi Aramco. Saudi Aramco is the most valuable petrochemical company in the world. A few years ago, in terms of market value, it was highly valued ahead of Apple, ahead of Nvidia. And how do they do that? Is it that they add value all in Saudi Arabia? No. They capture value in consumer markets. The largest petrochemical or oil refinery in the US, Motiva, based in Texas, is 100% owned by Saudi Arabia. They didn't just buy it, no. They started with the export of their crude oil to Texaco. For refining, it used to be 50-50 Texaco and Shell. Saudi Arabia purchased, Saudi Aramco purchased the 50% from Texaco, and not long ago also purchased the other 50% from Shell. So a US, the largest petrochemical company in North America, is owned by a commodity exporting country, and that is Saudi Arabia. They have big stakes in China's petrochemical industry. And that is through the same strategy. Because rather than you struggling so much to create or to add value within your, when you do that, you will export it anyway. There's value in consumer market. How do I capture value in that space? And that is what, as cocoa producing country, we need to start looking at. If you walk into a Tesco, a Lidl, an Aldi, the chocolate bar that you see there is not manufactured by them. There are contract manufacturers that are doing that. So similarly, countries like Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, if they want to capture value, this is a consumer market. If you're going to bring in chocolate from Ghana, it will struggle to compete with a Lindt bar, which is my favorite chocolate, here in Europe. Get in touch or connect and build relationships. And when I read the case of Saudi Arabia, they mentioned something strategic marketing relationships. And that is what we need to do from a policy perspective. From researchers, it's important for us to also look at, okay, how do you use your cracking brains to come up with research on how commodity-dependent countries can take advantage of some of these strategies. So I'll say a big thank you for giving me the audience, and that is what I have for you today. Thanks so much.